From raging fans to exploding drums, getting on stage in front of thousands is risky business. These musicians learn the hard way that the road to fame and fortune is bumpy as hell. It's no big shocker that The Who's lead guitarist Pete Townshend suffers from hearing loss. Raucous stage shows and loud amps will have that effect over time, but unsurprisingly, so will Keith Moon's tendency to blow up his drum kit. The band was riding high in the autumn of 1967 when I Can See for Miles became their first top 10 hit in America. They booked a gig on the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour, a show that actually encouraged The Who's destructive tendencies, which typically included smashing guitars. Townshend later explained that Moon convinced a technician to build him a small cannon for his drum kit. During the rehearsal, it created an explosion that wasn't very impressive. Moon insisted on amping up its firepower so the band's performance could end with a proper bang. The stage manager obliged, but he didn't know that the drummer later added even more kick to that explosive device himself, ultimately giving it about 3 times more firepower. After the band performed My Generation, Townshend and bassist John Entwistle diligently started breaking their instruments. That's when Moon's cannon did its thing. It also set Townshend's hair on fire and significantly damaged his hearing. Slipknot has a pretty hardcore commitment to onstage theatrics, and if you need proof, look no further than, well, a majority of its core members. Within the span of a year, singer Corey Taylor and guitarist Jim Root and Mick Thompson all underwent spinal surgeries. Taylor's spinal problems began as early as 1999 when he slipped off of the Ozfest stage and twisted his neck. The injury didn't immediately paralyze him, so Taylor continued to perform and did so for years without realizing what was to come. Finally, in 2016, a doctor informed him that 2 of his vertebrae had fused, smashed the spinal disc, and caused bone to protrude into his spinal cord. He quickly went into emergency surgery to have the disc replaced and the bone shaved down, but the long-term injury left a nasty scar behind.
I came back out kind of quick after the surgery, so I'm kind of dealing with pain and stuff like that.
Meanwhile, Root told the podcast The Josta Show that he encountered a similar pain the same year that was leaving his left arm numb. It turns out that he, too, had ruptured 2 discs in his neck and needed to have them both replaced. In early 2017, Thompson joined him, posting an X-ray on Instagram of his own disc replacement. As if you didn't see this one coming, right? Betting odds would say the man born James Newell Osterberg Jr. should have at least a few long-term injuries at this point. After countless madcap, energetic, and downright raunchy performances that have involved everything from fistfights with bikers to slashing himself with a broken drumstick, it's amazing that Iggy Pop is still able to set foot on a stage, let alone sing on it. His current injuries include a bad hip and, as he puts it, a twisted spine. One of Iggy's more recent injuries happened during a show at the Peninsula Festival in Romania on August 27, 2011. He broke 2 bones in his left foot while performing with his band, the Stooges. As a result, they had to postpone a planned tour of the United States, and America had to wait a while to watch Iggy hurt himself. In 2019, the punk legend told The New Yorker that his skeleton is the weak area, and he sometimes uses a cane to get around. Phil Collins may have cut his teeth playing the drums, but nowadays a former Genesis frontman can hardly hold a drumstick.
So enough of that.
That's because while touring in 2007, Collins dislocated vertebrae in his neck and damaged nerves in his hands. He attributed it to his drumming technique, telling the Daily Mail that his performance posture gradually crushed his spinal cord. Despite undergoing surgery in 2009, not even taping sticks to his hands was enough to get him back behind the kit professionally. He explained that his left hand just couldn't hold on to the drumstick well enough. After briefly going into retirement, Collins announced the comeback tour in 2016 and continued playing with Genesis up until their so-called final performance in 2022. But his ability to perform continued deteriorating. Collins went through spinal surgery in 2010 and then again in 2015, the latter giving him drop foot, a condition that leaves no feeling in one of your feet. This contributed to him taking a fall in 2017, which required Collins to not only receive stitches, but also left him having to walk with a cane or be seated in a wheelchair. That's why during Genesis's farewell concerts, Collins remained seated and kept his contributions to just vocals and some tambourine. His son Nick Collins took over drumming duties. Bandmate Mike Rutherford confirmed to BBC Breakfast that Collins' mobility remains impaired following the tour. When Danny Elfman was asked if he would ever reunite on stage with his former band Oingo Boingo, his answer was an adamant no. This isn't because of any beef with his bandmates. It's because his years around all that loud music left him with permanent hearing damage. After years on stage and with his then burgeoning career in film scoring taking up more and more time, Elfman formally disbanded Oingo Boingo in 1995. This led to a break from live performance for almost 2 decades, but Elfman has returned to the stage since. In 2013, he sang as Jack Skellington from The Nightmare Before Christmas and Danny Elfman's music from the films of Tim Burton, a concert series featuring newly composed suites performed by a live orchestra. In an interview with Yahoo, Elfman explained that an orchestra's volume is much more manageable than a rock band's. This led to more performances as the years went on. He still tours the Burton series around the world, and he even went hard at Coachella in 2022 with a full-on rock set.
It's a massive performance that's just going to be very schizophrenic.
He's hit the stage with original Oingo Boingo guitarist Steve Bartek and is still rocking venues. As for the hearing loss, he told Variety that in-ear monitors helped to manage the volume. Vocalist and songwriter Mike Patton was eager to make a good first impression when he signed on to lead rock group Faith No More in 1988. The band had fired their former frontman Chuck Mosley, but were still dead set on maintaining their fan base following a hit single in the UK. Patton brought an excitable energy to the group, but it proved to be unwieldy. As he told the San Francisco Chronicle, during a show at a San Francisco nightclub, the band was filming live footage for a music video when Patton fell over and sliced his right hand on a broken bottle, severing a tendon. Following the incident, Patton spent over 5 hours in reconstructive microsurgery and was told by doctors he would maintain feeling but lose movement in his right hand. However, the exact opposite happened. He was still able to move his hand, but it went numb from nerve damage.
Oh! Oh!
See how it moves?
As a result, he learned how to do everything with his left hand and basically taught himself to be ambidextrous. He can still play the guitar with his right hand to write music, though he'll sometimes drop his own pick without realizing. From the beginning, the Dillinger Escape Plan's live shows have been filled with wild stunts, climbing balconies, fighting security guards, and even fire breathing. For guitarist Ben Weinman, that's come with its fair share of injuries, from manageable limps and black eyes to more permanent damage, like rotator cuff and wrist fractures, spinal scars, and a complete lack of cartilage in his knees. Weinman detailed his worst on-stage injury in the book Raising Hell, Backstage Tales from the Lives of Metal Legends. Within the first few seconds of a set in 2005 at Anaheim's Chain Reaction, Weinman jumped and whacked his head on a large hanging speaker. He fractured his neck and lacerated his scalp, spewing blood across the closest audience members. He finished the set, but was later sent to the hospital to receive 8 staples in his head. Years later, after a multi-year disbandment, they were still going just as hard on stage with several shows in 2024 and 2025. Best known in the States for his work composing the opening theme for Attack on Titan, Yoshiki is one of the best drummers to ever pick up sticks. Few performers can match his ferocious stamina, though that might be for the best. Since as early as 1990, Yoshiki has dealt with chronic disc herniation in his neck and tendonitis in his hands as a result of his hyperactive drumming. Though he spent 2 different periods in the 90s recovering from the effects, his condition worsened and caused damage to the nerves in his left arm while reunited with X-Japan in 2008 and 2009. At that time, doctors warned Yoshiki that continuing to perform would have disastrous effects on his body. Though he underwent 2 spinal surgeries and even began wearing a neck brace on stage to relieve the pressure, Yoshiki continued to channel all his energy into every performance. Unfortunately, he lost feeling in his left hand in January of 2017, and mere months later required another emergency neck surgery, this time to insert an artificial disc into his spine. You would think this would be the final straw, but he endured more surgeries over the years, including a 3rd spinal surgery in 2024, which led to him making appearances in a wheelchair for a short time. The songwriter has been public about the serious pain he's experienced while performing live, but like all of the greats, it doesn't look like he has it in him to stop rocking anytime soon. Playing for Bruce Springsteen can take a lot out of you. Just ask his drummer, Max Weinberg. After scoring the gig of a lifetime in 1974, the New Jersey native has been keeping time for the boss and his E Street Band for over 40 years. Like Springsteen himself, Weinberg goes hard for every performance, but time has caught up with him on multiple occasions. Speaking to Washington Life, Weinberg said he has undergone multiple back surgeries, shoulder reconstruction surgery, and, most notably, 7 operations to help relieve repetitive stress injuries in his hands. By the early 80s, as the E Street Band was recording their soon-to-be hit record Born in the USA, Springsteen thought Weinberg was starting to slack at keeping time. What he didn't know was that Weinberg was beginning to succumb to years of immense pain in his fingers from a strong performing style. It was to the point that they were getting stuck in a clenched position after shows. He sought medical attention at a performing arts clinic, where he was diagnosed with extreme tendonitis and tenosynovitis, 2 conditions caused by intense inflammation of his hands' tendons.
And he puts his hands in ice after the show because they hurt so much after drumming for 3 hours. Is that true, Max?
Yes.
It is. Wow.
Weinberg was operated on 7 times within 2 years, which provided his hands greater flexibility. But unlike many musicians, he actually strove to improve his performance after the fact. He learned how to improve his previously sloppy technique and even wears gloves when he sleeps. As a result, he still drums with the boss to this day. Slayer's Tom Araya learned the hard way that humans never evolved to aggressively headbang for decades. After feeling pain in his back during an overseas tour in 2009, Araya was diagnosed with a pinched nerve in his spine. At first, he wasn't interested in going through the process of full-on neck surgery, but after a series of smaller procedures didn't do anything to help, he agreed to the removal of a herniated disc as well as the fusion of 3 spinal vertebrae, despite having to cancel 2 legs of touring in order to properly heal from it. The surgery was successful, but ever since, Araya has held himself back from his headbanging. He even spent his next tour using a specially designed weighted belt to alleviate the neck strain from his bass strap. According to Araya, his problems came from poor onstage posture. Because his normal stance pushed most of his weight forward, his headbanging slowly pulled at his spine until it gave way. In an interview with Loudwire in 2016, Araya said he still missed connecting with the headbangers in the crowd, but wants to play it safe to avoid any more damage. Not all the bumps and bruises at live shows come from the artist. Sometimes the audience gets too rowdy. Pop star Bebe Rexha experienced this firsthand when in 2023 she was hit in the head with a cell phone during a concert in New York City. The phone landed over her eye and she was rushed to a hospital and treated with stitches. Apparently, the man who threw the phone was attempting a TikTok trend in which artists take selfies with bands' phones on stage. Well, he ended up starting a new trend instead. He was arrested and had a restraining order filed against him.
27-year-old Nicholas Malvagna of New Jersey was charged with assault for throwing the phone.
Though the experience was surely harrowing, Rexha didn't let that stop her for long. Less than a week later, she performed in Philly and jokingly asked the audience not to throw any phones at her. Curtis Mayfield spent decades crooning soulful hits, but tragedy struck on August 13, 1990. At a benefit concert for Senator Martin Markowitz, a blast of wind blew through the crowd and over the stage as the band began playing Mayfield's hit song Superfly. The gust caused a lighting rig over the stage to come loose, which landed on Mayfield, paralyzing him from the neck down for the rest of his life. Unfortunately, it gets worse. Mayfield also suffered from phantom hands, an awful condition that he compared to feeling like his hands had been forced into buckets full of snakes. It didn't stop him from continuing to write and record music, though. While Mayfield could no longer play guitar, he would sing while laying on his back in the studio. He passed away on December 26, 1999 from complications of type 2 diabetes. Andy Partridge, the vocalist and lead songwriter of Britpop cult favorite XTC, had long been disillusioned with live performances as the group found fame. This was for multiple reasons, including his own preference for the sound of original recordings to the often stripped-down live arrangement, but none of them were enough to convince his record label or his bandmates to stop.
You have to really fight. Nobody gives you anything on a plate.
Eventually, Partridge's complete physical and mental breakdown ended XTC's chances of performing live ever again. Beginning in 1980, exacerbated by anxiety to live up to the band's growing success, Partridge was often physically exhausted and mentally dissociative. Before gigs, he would have intense stomach pains and all-consuming panic attacks, and during gigs, he would often forget where he was. Partridge recounted to Austin's KGSR that he also damaged his hearing and put his prostate through the ringer due to excessive drinking. Eventually, Partridge's debilitating condition and ongoing gastric problems were enough to send him back to England, where he began hypnotherapy. Some of Partridge's issues only got worse later in life. After an engineer accidentally blasted a snare drum at full volume into his headphones during a studio session, Partridge developed an extreme case of tinnitus that still rings in his ears. Ann-Margret's stage and screen legacy would never have you believe it was once at risk. As recounted in her memoir, Ann-Margret, My Story, the Triple Threat was touring a nightclub act in September 1972 and was set to debut at a resort in Lake Tahoe. Conceived by her manager-turned-husband Roger Smith, the show was supposed to begin with the performer being lowered on a platform from 22 feet in the air. During rehearsals, this platform rested on a single pipe, but an additional pipe was added before the first performance to help steady the wobbly platform. When the show began, only one pipe began lifting. This tipped Ann-Margret off of her platform and sent her falling straight to the floor. The star was immediately sent to intensive care, where she was treated for numerous fractures, broken bones, and lacerations across her face, left arm, and knee. Smith and the couple's lawyer wanted surgery done through her mouth to avoid leaving scars on her face. When the doctors refused, they stole a small plane and flew to Anaheim, where the procedure was completed. Part of the surgery removed cartilage from her jaw, causing the joint to produce a strange noise when she opened and closed her mouth that remained for the rest of her life. All things considered, she persevered remarkably well and was back on stage by November 28th of that same year. During her time as a cabaret performer, German singer and actress Marlene Deitrich maintained an image of lavish sophistication. After decades of smoking cigarettes, Deitrich quit in the 1960s over a bet. She was also secretly dealing with the effects of Berger's disease, common among smokers, including swollen blood vessels and hampered blood flow. Her body rapidly began deteriorating, but she continued to perform with the help of excessive drinking, performance uppers, and sleeping pills. Steve Bach's biography, Marlene Deitrich, Life and Legend, explains where things began to take a turn for the worse. During the final bows of a show in 1973, Deitrich went to shake the hand of the orchestra conductor, who stood atop a piano bench in the orchestra pit to help Deitrich reach him. As they shook hands, the piano bench broke, and a protruding nail sliced the skin of Deitrich's left thigh and left a gaping wound that she refused to treat until after her tour was completed. When she finally sought medical attention, she required skin graft and bypass surgeries. Though both were successful, she continued to perform, and 1 year later, her left femur gave out before a stage entrance. Her wound was torn open once more, effectively ending her stage career. The artist was well known for his amazing live shows, but in his younger years, he really cut loose. Prince often wore high-heeled shoes while performing, and despite his choice of impractical footwear, he often jumped around, causing undue stress to his joints. In the mid-80s, his protege Sheila E. joined him during his Purple Rain tour as an opening act, and later told the press that even back then, Prince was in constant pain. In the years that followed, he was sometimes spotted limping or even riding a motorized scooter to get around while out on tour. He was reportedly using opioids to manage his chronic pain during his later years, and his reliance on drugs got so bad that he turned to addiction specialists to beat his habit, mere days before his body was found on April 21, 2016. Frank Zappa, one of rock's greatest and most prolific eccentrics, suffered from chronic back pain after a bizarre incident during a performance at London's Rainbow Theatre on December 10, 1971. As he and his band began a jokey cover of the Beatles' I Wanna Hold Your Hand, a man in the crowd turned violent, jumping on stage after flying into a rage, then shoved Zappa into the theater's orchestra pit. The man attempted to flee but was apprehended by members of the crowd. As he later explained, the man wasn't angry that Zappa was mocking one of Britain's most beloved rock groups, but rather that his girlfriend had admitted she had a crush on Zappa. The incident landed Zappa in a wheelchair for almost a year, and reportedly his crushed larynx caused his voice to drop an octave. Many performers have fallen off stages over the years, but luckily most escape with nothing more than a bruised ego. Unfortunately, that isn't the case for everyone.
I think I really broke my leg.
Just ask Patti Smith, who teamed up with Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band for a show in Tampa in 1977. Smith was known for her wild performances back then, which often included lots of twirling. But for this show, the stage crew didn't leave her with much space to work with. She made do with what little room she had, but when her foot hit a stage monitor during the show, she was sent tumbling over the side of the dimly lit stage. Smith fell 15 feet into the orchestra pit, broke vertebrae in her neck, and fractured her spine. She still suffers from neck pain, but as she told the Houston Chronicle in 2012, "It's nothing I can't live with." In 2017, after the second to fourth shows in front of audiences of nearly 100,000 fans at London's Wembley Stadium, Adele realized something wasn't quite right. She struggled during the first two nights and kept having to clear her throat. She saw her doctor, who told her she'd badly damaged her vocal cords and should cancel the last two shows at Wembley, which were meant to serve as the finale of her record-setting tour. Sadly, she experienced a similar problem when she suffered a hemorrhage after singing live on a French radio show in 2011 and underwent a very risky vocal cord microsurgery. The King of Pop was a legendary performer, but two onstage incidents left him with long-lasting injuries and pain. In January 1984, while performing on stage at the Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles for a Pepsi commercial, he was dancing along to his hit single Billie Jean when he got too close to a pyrotechnic display, setting his jacket and hair on fire. Someone ran onto stage, threw him to the floor, and extinguished the blaze, but not before he sustained second and third-degree burns on his face and scalp. He was also left with a series of painful migraines that persisted long after his treatment was completed. Jackson suffered another injury in 1999 after falling over 30 feet while performing Earth Song at a concert in Munich. He was raised into the air on a bridge that then unexpectedly dropped back to the stage. Jackson managed to get back to his feet and finish the show, but he reportedly collapsed backstage afterward. The incident reportedly left him with chronic back pain that often flared up when he was suffering from mental or physical stress. Sid Wilson, the turntablist for Slipknot, was once known for his crazy onstage behavior, which included being set on fire and doing impressive jumps off the stage and other structures. On July 9, 2008, the band was performing at the Rockstar Energy Mayhem Festival in Auburn, Washington, playing their newest single, Psychosocial, for the first time in front of an audience. Wilson jumped off a platform on the back of the stage while wearing a 40-pound costume and landed wrong, shattering both heels. It put him in a wheelchair, but that didn't stop him from continuing to play.
Now I've been continuing the tour with broken heels.
He continues to have occasional foot trouble though, most recently in 2015, putting an end to many of his onstage antics. Grabbing drones while they're in mid-flight is dangerous. Spanish heartthrob Enrique Iglesias learned this the hard way when he grabbed one equipped with a camera during a performance in Tijuana, Mexico on May 30th, 2015. It was a big mistake, even though he'd done this during prior shows. That night, his hand got a little too close to the drone's spinning blades. They sliced open one of his palms, fracturing his hand in the process. Iglesias wrapped his hand in a t-shirt and left the stage. He later had reconstructive surgery, but told Univision that he no longer has any feeling in one of his fingers.